Hello, it's been a busy day today and it's still going to be a busy night ahead. You see, today is Thursday, and on Thursday we heavily prepare for the incoming Sabbath. Every single week we have a lot of work ahead of us. We prepare food, delicacies, we make sure the house is clean and sparkling for the Sabbath, which some of us call Shabbat and some of us call Shabbos. So I've been busy with that. And now I have a few minutes. I just want to sit down and schmooze. I wanted to bring up a topic that is pretty interesting, and we're just going to have a conversation about this. In the Christian Bible, you will see very frequent mentions of heaven and hell, and it's just all over the place that people who don't believe in Jesus are going to burn in the lake of fire. But what's really interesting is if you look in the Tanakh, you don't see anything like that at all. There's not a single mention of hell. There is one mention of something that happens after death. That's in Isaiah 22:14. And it says that the sin will not be atoned for until you die. Now, what's really interesting there is the word until you die. So in other words, there is some kind of atonement that happens after a person dies. So this is what I want to talk about today. The Torah doesn't speak about hell. It doesn't speak about a punishment after death. Basically, what happens when a person dies, a person's soul goes through a little bit of a trauma when it removes itself from the body, because the two became very interdependent upon each other in this world. They became very connected, and it can be a traumatic experience for the soul and the body to separate. And there are some sins that aren't atoned for until after death, so the soul has to go through a purification process. And it's kind of like if you take a pair of dirty, stinky, soiled socks and you throw it into a washing machine, and it's a rather unpleasant thing if you think about these poor socks. They're going into hot water and they're being spun about, but at the end of the day they emerge clean and refreshed and ready to be as they were intended to be. So the same thing happens to us. When we're down here in this world, our soul gets a little soiled from the things that we encounter and the difficulties that we face, the challenges that we try to overcome, and sometimes we may not overcome. And some of those sins we may repent for here on earth. Hopefully we will. And there can be this atonement, which means at oneness, if you break it down, on this earth, if we go through certain steps. But after death can also be an atonement. So this process called Gehenna, it restores a soul to its former brilliance. Now, we are taught that this atonement process can last a maximum of 12 months. That's for somebody who was really bad in this world and they didn't repent for their sins. The average person is completely finished with this process after 11 months, and they're ready to just be in a peaceful state of bliss at one with God. Now, there are some souls that don't have the chance to even go through this atonement process. They don't have a chance for this purification, for this cleansing, because they were so drastically bad here on this earth. There's just nothing to salvage. So they don't get a chance to be cleaned up. They just cease to exist. That's for somebody like who was a mass murderer, somebody who just perpetuated intense evil upon the world. Such a person doesn't even get a chance for this cleansing process. So this eternal lake of fire, it completely contradicts the Jewish view. And the question is why? Why do Christians always refer to this eternal lake of fire? Why do they refer to hell? Oh, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. You see, if we look at the Tanakh does have threats of what will happen if the Jewish people don't follow the Torah, but they're always verifiable. They're things like God is not going to send the rain. The Jewish people will be exiled. There will be disease. There will be a famine. These different types of things are mentioned as threats in the Bible, or as natural consequences, let's say. And each time they came upon us, they were completely verifiable. The Jewish people are in exile. The Jewish people have been in exile. And the question is what about Christianity? Why is Christianity using this threat of an eternal lake of fire? It's completely unverifiable. I mean, do you know of anybody who has been to hell and lived to tell the tale? You haven't, because it is completely unverifiable. A religion that is not based upon solid foundations, that is not based upon truth, that does not have a God who can actually do what he says, Such a religion will use unverifiable threats. They will say things that people cannot not see, not experience, that they have no connection to, something that can only exist in the imagination, and they will threaten the people with that. They will say you're going to burn an eternal lake of fire. Such a thing that can inspire fear but cannot be proven. So Christianity and other religions that speak of this horrific punishment that unbelievers are going to have, they're using an unverifiable threat that will just scare people to ensure religious compliance. So this is a really important point to understand, that, only God would use a verifiable threat that we can actually see come into being should we do the action that he tells us not to. So no, you're not going to burn an eternal lake of fire. You might have to go through an intense cleansing, or God forbid, you might completely cease to exist. But an eternal lake of fire does not exist, so knock that fear out of your head.